We've got a slice of rarity for you this time on Classics World. The Standard Pennant. Now, I've been working on car magazines for a really long time, longer than I want to remember, and I don't remember ever having seen one, let alone driven one. So let's find out what they're all about. So what is a Standard Pennant? Well, it's essentially an upmarket version of the Standard 10, and that in turn was an upmarket version of the 8. The Standard 8 was Standard's first post-war new model. It's one of their first cars to use unitary body shell, and the industry was still feeling its way with the technology back then. Some makers like Jaguar chose to go sort of all in and double skin everything, and the result was quite a heavy, complicated body shell. Standard went totally the other way, and this whole construction is an exercise in minimalism. I mean, everything you can see is structural, everything you can touch is essential to the integral strength of the body shell. There's just no spare metal at all, and they constructed it out of the thinnest metal they could manage as well. They really kept the cost down. This was the age of austerity. The 8 came out in the early 50s, and cost was paramount. In fact, the early Standard 8 was so primitive and so basic. It had one windscreen wiper, and it didn't even have an opening boot lid. You had to access the boot through the back seats, which folded down. So the 10 obviously improved things a little bit. And by the time the Pennant came out in 57, people wanted a little bit more. The austerity was gradually fading, the wartime memories were gone, and people wanted more than a single windscreen wiper. To create the Pennant, Standard did some quite clever tricks that created an upmarket model at minimal cost, really. The front wings are bolt-on, so they just managed to bolt on different shaped wings with a hooded headlamp style. That gave the front end a different look. And at the rear wings were replaced with finned rear wings, and that created a completely different style. And most of the Pennants came with optional two-tone paintwork. I mean, it was optional, but most people chose it. It does brighten up the look of it. In fact, I've been reading the Autocar road test from 1958, and one of the things they say is they refer to the Pennant as this bright little car. You just imagine the journalists of the time. It's a bright little car, old chap, don't you know? Bright little car. I do feel like I should be smoking a pipe and wearing tweed actually driving the thing. It does have a real 50s feel to it. Something else they commented on back in the day, the road testers mentioned how small the car is inside. And they said something you can't really get away with these days. They said larger people will find it harder to get in and out of the front and rear compartments. And I know what they mean, having tried to get in with a big puffer coat on. It is a little bit tight, and I'm not a big chap. They mentioned that the sharp door catches are likely to tear your clothing. It feels a little bit smaller than a Morris Minor and a little bit bigger than an A35, and that was really where the 10 and certainly the Pennant sat in the marketplace. Mechanically, the Pennant was identical to the Standard 10, except it curiously had an extra 2 horsepower, taking the total to a mighty 37. It's the 950 Standard engine, which was essentially the engine you found in the Herald. Need to get a few revs on to get up this hill. It's interesting, back in the day, in the 50s, the road testers reckoned the thing would do 20 miles an hour in first gear and 36 miles an hour in second gear, and that was just limited by the valves bouncing. And then later on in the road test, they mentioned the car had 1,500 miles on it. Imagine treating a brand new car like that today, but even a car with 50s technology, I should think it was absolutely wrecked by the time they handed it back. But having said that, it does feel quite lively and eager. And remember, this is a 50s car. I'm not going to try for 36 miles an hour in second gear. I mean, I just couldn't do that. Couldn't bring myself to. But yeah, it's able to keep up with traffic actually. And you'd think with 37 horsepower, it wouldn't be so happy on modern roads, but actually it's fine. And you wouldn't want to go on the motorway in it, really. You feel too vulnerable, and you know that the body shell was constructed, down to a cost, and the crash safety is probably not really what you want for a motorway. But in urban driving, it feels all right actually, and it's quite a nice, handy size. It's not as narrow as an A35. I mean, you can't sort of slip it through those tiny gaps in traffic, but it does feel pretty much sort of practical. It's actually reasonably comfortable. This car. It doesn't have the sort of bottoming out feel of the Morris. It doesn't have the tippy toes feel of the A35. It rides quite well actually. Yeah, we're doing sort of 40, 45 miles an hour now. It starts to get a little bit sort of floaty and wandery at anything approaching sort of 50 miles an hour. It's quite happy at 40 though, and I guess that was the speed you travelled around in these sort of cars back then. You got 4 drum brakes, of course, but they work well enough as long as you are aware that you've got 4 drum brakes. Once you get used to it, it's pretty easy to drive. The normal synchro first can catch you out there like it does in all the cars of this vintage. But I did drive a 68 Morris for a long time, and I did get used to just double clutching it into first for mini roundabouts. That's when you really notice it. Mini roundabouts just didn't exist in the 50s, did they? The lack of seat belts, this big steering wheel pointing at your face, and a lot of sharp edges you can feel behind the seats, and the 4 drum brakes do make you drive very sensibly, I have to say, especially in January on a muddy road. So yeah, quite safe in that respect. It's only when you start to go a bit faster on these country lanes that you realise the age of the suspension design. You start to notice you're being bounced in the seat a bit. We drive cars of all ages on Classics World. You don't drive that many 50s cars, and every time I drive one, it does take me a little bit of time to get back into the groove, but I've done a couple of miles now and I feel yeah, a bit happier behind the wheel, and you know, starting to gel with the car a bit. And yeah, you're not going very fast, but you feel like you're doing 100 miles an hour, of course, because you've got to concentrate on every single thing, notably the brakes, and of course the less than precise steering. And you know, the gear shift is a nice precise one, but it does need a bit of concentration. The engine's warmed through a bit now as well, and it is a cold day today, and it just the whole car feels a bit happier for having a few miles under its belt. You know, I think they were right, those Autocar guys. It is a bright little car. You know, as a curious expression to use about a car, but it is a bright little car. With just 37 horsepower, you forget, you know, how easy it is in a modern car to just maintain progress. With 37 horsepower, you really have to concentrate on gradients ahead and conserving speed, and of course then you come to a 30 limit and you know, you don't want to slow down, but you have to. You've got a Mark 7 Golf welded to the rear bumper, and you can't quite understand why you've slowed down for the speed limit. How they did 36 miles an hour in second gear, I have no idea. Animals. So there you have it, the Standard Pennant. Quite the rarest car I've driven on Classics World, and probably the rarest thing I'm going to drive all year. I mean, it is only January though, so let's see what happens for the rest of the year. And if you do want to find out, then like and subscribe. Is that a sort of auto stop? Don't think we got start stop in 1958, did we?